This is the first video in our tutorial series on how to create miniatures terrain and how to paint miniatures. I'm recording this for a teacher friend of mine, George Zabo, who is teaching a class at a summer camp this year, and this is for his students. What we're doing today is I'm using the Bones 3 Kickstarter materials and a couple figures from Bones 2 to create a graveyard scene that we will have done by this weekend, and will be put together a relatively comprehensive video. The first step you're gonna want to do, honestly, is plan out. As you can see, I've got everything laid out here how I intend to do it. I'm using a pressed board, which is a compressed particle board with glue. It's rather sturdy, but if you have a limited budget or are working with hand tools like a razor blade or box knife, you can use foam core. You can use some of the really stiff poster board as well. I prefer the press board because since I do show pieces, they need to be really durable. But the first step is to plan everything out, and then you're going to want to measure, well, mark, not measure, the outline of what you want your piece to be. In this case, I'm going to give myself a couple inches around, and then you want to mark where certain things were. That way you can plan them out and have them placed once you cut your base. If you're using foam core, you can actually just use a razor blade and cut that out now. And once I get all this marked, I'm going to go ahead and take this outside and cut it, and then we'll pick back up in a moment. I went ahead and cut the base. I went ahead and beveled the edges because it is going to be a showpiece. That makes it look a little nicer. If you're using foam core, you can literally just cut it at an angle. This required a jigsaw and a vibrating sander. Thank you. But this is a very firm base for it. When attaching the plastics to your base, believe it or not, the super glue we use for our minis actually works best. And with this piece, I've got a couple interesting little things planned out. But the first thing I'm going to do is attach this section of fence, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the base for the mausoleum down. But like I said, this works very well, so be very sure in your placement, because the moment you put it down, it's stuck. I mean, I say that and then it doesn't stick. See, that is affixed pretty much permanently. So you want to make sure that you're ready to go when you do this stuff. And this is the base for the mausoleum I was just talking about. You saw it in the first part of the video. The mausoleum sits on top. I'm going to integrate this into the entire set, and this will be a separate piece. But when you do this, once again, make sure that you are placing with surety, because the moment you press down, it is not coming up. When you do your piece, since we're going to be adding a texturing medium to give you a smooth appearance to it, you don't have to glue all the way around. But once again, this is a competition piece, so it will be traveling, so I want to make sure that nothing comes loose. And I got some glue on my finger. So when I put this down, it is down. That's part of why I like the foam core. It will not go as fast with the foam core, but it will go. The next part of this, I'm going to go ahead and affix the angels and their pedestals and the gate, so I've got a good idea of the boundary of my graveyard. And after that, I'm going to add a piece of styrofoam so I can actually have a little bit of a hill and an open grave to give it a little bit of creepy ambiance, because when you're doing a graveyard for Dungeons and Dragons, you might as well go all the way and make it as scary as possible. This episode not brought to you by Monster. as you can see, we're ready for our graveyard. Now, you can measure, you can mark. I, in a lot of these cases, prefer to just eyeball it. What I'm using is a hot wire cutter, which is specifically designed for this stuff. As you can see, it just slices through it like it was butter. Part of the reason I do this is because it's really difficult to get a good straight line with it, which gives you natural edges. That's about the right. But you can use a snap blade. I got this for 49 cents at Harbor Freight. And cut it the exact same way. Just take it through and cut. When you're using a snap blade or any other type of blade, styrofoam, believe it or not, will dull your blade very quickly. So keep a set of scissor sharpeners or a knife sharpener handy. You'll thank yourself in the long run. So that's about the right width. We'll do the same thing. And like I said, you don't need the fancy tools to do this. I just happen to have them because I do a lot of this. Now, depending on the foam you're using, you may wish to be very careful, because if it's a low density, it's going to be easy to break it, and I don't want to do that because I want to keep my terrain looking pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and give the other side a nice uneven edge too. And I said it's hard to get a good edge with this. That's not entirely true. I'm just purposely bending my wire while I do this so it gives a more natural look. Because how many times do you see that kind of thing? Well, hills that have a good clean edge. And then we eyeball it, and I'm going to cut it right about there. Oops. And you want to make sure you've got a little bit of a slope towards the center on all of these pieces, because that's how we're going to make it merge with the base. And there is the ground for my cemetery. Now I've got one spot that I need to touch off real quick because it's a little too long right here. And I knew it probably would be. And that's it with the hot wire cutter. Now, if you've ever tried to do a project where you painted styrofoam, you'll know that it does not, that stands out, and that can actually be very useful. If you got, Beau, can you see the cells on that? Okay. If you're doing a city street, this can be, this kind of foam, which is very light and flimsy, can be very useful for that, because you don't have to do cobblestones with this kind of styrofoam. You literally just paint it up and it looks like it. But for our purposes, we're going to go ahead and add a texturing medium because that's the whole that's where the whole piece is going to work. Now I've decided, when I was laying these out earlier, I decided that I wanted to have an open grave. So I'm going to figure out exactly where that's going to be. Space those a little evenly. Second row goes here. And then this one will be right there. So when I'm finished with this, we're gonna have one fresh grave without a tombstone and one open grave. And for that open grave, actually I'm gonna slide these over just a little bit because I'm also gonna add a tree here in a couple minutes. But for that open grave, I want to mark that way I've got something to cut, or a place to cut. Be right here. And with this one, we're going to go ahead and use the snap blade. When doing this, attaching styrofoam, there are a couple ways you can do it when you're setting up one of these pieces. I personally will recommend hot glue because And you have to be careful with the hot glue, and I'll show you how to do it here in a minute. But hot glue sticks without eating your styrofoam. Low temp glue gun is best, but if you've got a high temp glue gun, you can still make it work, and I'll show you how. Most of your other adhesives like cyanoacrylate are going to eat the plastic and eat the styrofoam pretty much instantly. Now, Beau, you're my cameraman. Do you think I should line the graves up this way or the other way? Which do you think would be more aesthetically pleasing?
The way that you originally got this.
Okay, that's what I thought. Now, when using a high temp glue with styrofoam, what you're going to do is you're going to measure out where you want it to be. That way you can get it all lined up. And you're going to apply it and let it start to cool. And as most of you know, it stays sticky while it's cooling down. But before I do that, I'm going to do something else, because I've got this lovely little tree we're going to add to the back. And my tree kind of got a little crushed here. We pull it off its base. We punch it through to make a space for it. And then we're going to stick that pen through and mark where it sits, so I can put the base down right there. That way the tree will sit in its base. Now you just take your hot glue, do a quick bead around. And I've got the air conditioning running because it is Louisiana in the summer, so this hot glue is gonna cool down pretty quick. But you want to make sure that it's coolish, because I got hot glue in the base of the tree there. I'm going to stick it in now, and then you press it down, and it's not going to come up. It's also not going to melt away. Had I put it directly on the full temperature hot glue, that would have destroyed it. And I'll give you a demonstration right here. See how it's melting into that? That becomes problematic, as you can see above. So we're going to do the same basic thing. Put a dot here, give it a moment to start cooling, and then place it. Okay, what I'm getting ready to do, you've seen everything else here. I had to break to spread out some plastic because this next step is very messy. This is a silicone paintable sealant. It's bright white, but it allows us to basically cover this and cover this in such a way that we can actually paint it and make it look good, for lack of a better word. I went ahead and pulled out the tree because when I'm done with this, you need to prime this stuff. You can use Army Painter or Citadel. I personally use Vallejo, and I'll give you a rundown and the product description in my video video series on painting minis. But the Vallejo primer, I run it through my airbrush. It does wonderfully. It's very, very strong. That's what I use for all of this. But especially if you're going to use any spray paint, you may want to make sure that all of your styrofoam is covered, because the toluene in the propellant will eat that away. But the next step is we're going to take, and I've already got a little glob here, usually just going to take it apply it to your piece and smooth it out. Now, one of the ways to smooth it out is to use vinegar, and I'll show you as we go. The vinegar does not interact with the caulk, so you can smooth it out without keeping the caulk from actually setting. And we want it to set because that's how you get your pretty thing. Now you want to put a very even coat on here, but you also don't want it to be thick because you want it to dry. For me, it's going to be overnight, but you take it, you smear it on, and when we're done with this, we're going to add paint, we're going to add some other things to it to give it a finished look. But as you can see here, this goes on nice, and I will get back to an explanation of that here in a little while. I'm not going to be talking much as I do this because once we get this applied, we have to get it smoothed out. You can see that pretty clearly?
Oh yes,
I'm
definitely.
looking here. So come in a little closer. We're going to dip it in the vinegar, and we're going to just literally wipe that away. And don't worry if it gets up there in the cracks, because believe it or not, that makes it look a little better. Take it right along the edge here and clean it up. And then you take your vinegar and you apply it, and you can smooth this out. Like this. See how well it goes? On the table. Look for blue. Well, that's fine. Just bring those.
Free floating.
That works. That works for now. Just toss them over here. You think the way it's coming out?
You're asking me or Beau?
You.
Coming out really nicely from the looks of it.
And the thing to remember when you're doing this is a lot of people are going to get upset because it's not perfect. You don't find perfection in nature, not in a landscape. So what we're doing actually is smoothing it out so it doesn't look like there's fingerprints and grooves, but making it your imperfections actually are what are going to sell the piece. If that makes any sense. Now along through here, I don't mind that there's a couple spaces because I'm going to put flock and static grass in there, so it's going to go ahead and look fine. Now, while the vinegar does not interact with it, it does keep it from drying quickly. So be careful not to use too much. Now we come to the part where we have to make sure that everything is covered, because everything that I've done so far can be exposed to spray paints or whatever. What I'm getting ready to do is this area, and we have to make sure that all of this is covered. Don't want to ruin my ring, because otherwise this will melt away if you hit it with a spray paint. Like I say, I'm using an airbrush and Vallejo model painter, which is specifically designed for this kind of work, and as such it should not be a problem, but you still want to make sure that the styrofoam is covered up, because otherwise you'll have that texture. And like I say, depending on the project you're doing, that texture can actually be desirable. This is not one of those projects for me. that dry, and it'll be ready to paint in the next day or so. Actually, it'll be ready to paint probably in about 12 hours. But that is how you do basic terrain. You can apply the same techniques to any piece you got. You can make your own. You're using foam core and styrofoam, seal it, and then you're good to go. This is the end of the first tutorial. My next tutorial, I will show you how to actually finish this one out. That includes painting, texturing, the grass, pretty much everything. Thank you.